16, City Tax Administrator Hamilton indicated that she needs to increase the refunds account by $175,000 because two businesses requested large refunds totaling approximately $110,000. The refunds account is nearly depleted of appropriated funds, so she's requesting suspension. Also, because of increasing mailings and the rising cost of postage, she is asking for an appropriation of $3,000 for the remainder of the year. In both cases, any unspent funds will be picked up in the end of year carryover. And City Tax Administrator Hamilton is here for any questions.
I think it's kind of obvious. The good thing is we're bringing in more than we did last year, but on the flip side of that is we also get hit with the refunds. Particularly, I had one business that made a $200,000 extension payment. It's not always that normal, and carry forward at $100,000, but requested $100,000. So that pretty much wiped out what I had asked for last time I was here. We have extensions coming up in October. Usually those are not a lot of refunds. Those are people who have delayed the inevitable of owing and needing to file. So I don't anticipate really going above and beyond. I think this has got enough cushion to get us through the end of the year. The other is the postage. As all of you are aware, it's an arm and a leg to mail a letter, and even with our discounted rate that we get through our bill servicer, the volume is just, it is what it is. So we've got to pad that a little more too.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Mr. Matlin, would you be a second? And we'll be suspending this evening?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the second item. I have Resolution 110-22, again coming from Finance. A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the .15 Fire Levy Fund 2046, and I apologize, it should be increase and or decrease. Fire Chief Mafflin indicated the projected overtime to cover the Fairfield County Fair, typical regular shift overtime, and overtime required for certification training. And the fire department will need to decrease their health insurance line item by $100,000 and increase the overtime line item by $100,000 to cover those expenses. Chief Matlin, thank you for joining us. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. We did some math, and we'll get reimbursed for what we're spending for fair coverage, but we're actually increasing what we've done in the past. So between that and we have a required certification that our officers need to go through that's basically been on hold since the pandemic. Those two items plus what we usually have, what I've been averaging in each payroll's overtime was going to put me significantly in the hole by the end of the year. So I'm just trying to get ahead of it.
Okay. Any questions for the chief? All right. And we're going 3 readings on this. Mr. McDaniel, will you be my second?
Yes.
Resolution 111-22, coming from Water Pollution Control, Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairperson Kreitz. I'm going to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium to give us a little more explanation of this. This is actually increasing the size of this particular pump station to handle a lot more of our new economic development. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Good evening, everybody. So yeah, what Tom said is correct. We, with all the development that is occurring and will be occurring within the next few years in the industrial area on the west side, US 33 corridor, the flows we're expecting to receive from those developments will be too large for the existing infrastructure to handle. So we did come up with a plan where we will essentially remove the pump station there along Mill Park Drive, along Mill Park Drive, pardon me, and take those flows in a new trunk sewer that will run essentially from there along Hocking River Lateral D and up to Campground Road. And the first half of that sewer has already been built there, partly within, I think it's a Port Authority site along Campground Road and then through the future Bowers Park. And that was completed just this past month. And this second phase will be built as part of the work we're doing with this legislation. And then once that sewer is in place, that will also involve a replacement of the pump station along Campground Road. Again, not sized to handle the flows we're expecting. So this work will also involve replacement of that pump station, which will then be directed directly to the Upper Hocking where the flow can be treated. And then, of course, this resolution deals with the engineering needed to design that, which we're wanting to do the rest of this year and early next year so that we can bid this project in the spring of next year. And again, so here we're asking for approval to enter into a contract with our engineer Arcadis for that.
And Stephen, 2 readings will be okay. I noticed you also will need a then and now certificate.
Correct, yes. I think to keep things on track, we might have, and Denise has been handling, pardon me, I don't know with 100% certainty. I think we may have given them to go ahead to get a jump start on this. So they would have started doing work, and I think that's why the then and now was included, so that once we get that invoice, that won't cause an issue there.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Mr. James, who's your second? Mr. Matlin?
Mr. Matlin.
All right. Moving to Resolution 112-22, coming out of Finance, a resolution confirming appointments to the Fairfield County Tax Incentive Review Council, or TURC. The Ohio Revised Code requires political subdivisions that permit tax incentives for economic development to form a TURC to meet and review to ensure that received tax incentives are complying with the terms of incentives. The mayor, per the ORC, is authorized to appoint 2 members, and he's appointing himself and Stephanie Bosco to serve. Are there any questions for the mayor? All right, we'll be suspending on that. And Mr. Matlin, will you be my second? Moving to Resolution 113-22, coming out of Finance, a resolution authorizing a new signatory on the City of Lancaster financial documents. With the retirement of Treasurer Wolfinger and the appointment of Joe Bizcheck as the acting city treasurer, this resolution authorizes Mr. Bizcheck to become a signatory on behalf of the city. Any questions?
Yes, I wanted to ask Stephanie. Stephanie, when Bob Wolfinger retired and resigned, did we have to appoint anybody at that time, or could we have Central Committee waited to vote a week from today?
It's the mayor's decision pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 733.31G. He has the authority to appoint an acting officer for the city.
Okay,
So-
but if he didn't, would have anything, I mean, he didn't have to do that, right? I mean, I understand, and he has a right to do that, but could we have waited for Central Committee to vote after, or did somebody have to be placed in that office?
Technically, we could have waited, but obviously, there's a vacancy, and so he made the decision.
Okay.
Yep. But I do want to point out too, I'm sorry, if you give me just a second, this is not just to put Joe on as a signatory, permanently. It references the fact that there will be a Central Committee meeting who will appoint the permanent successor for that position. And then that person would be authorized based on this legislation to be a signatory as well. Neither of the individuals who are seeking that position, as my understanding, have a bond currently. They're both in the process. So neither of them, can take office or do anything technically until they have a bond. And they're working on that. Like I said, it's a process. But this is just to make it so that, once everything gets settled, the process it flows smoothly, and, that person can get in the office and do the job.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay. We'll be suspending on that this evening. Mr. Matlin, would you be my second?
I will.
Moving on to ordinance 25-22, coming out of Finance, an ordinance to provide for issuance and sale of notes in the amount of $720,000 for the purpose of paying for the cost of overruns of the construction of the city's municipal court. This is an annual ordinance to finance the remaining balance of the debt associated with the cost overruns with the construction of the city's municipal court building. The original note was in the amount of $1.8 million, which has been being paid in 10 equal installments of $180,000 annually. To date, 6 of the 10 installments have been paid with 4 installments remaining in the amount of $180,000 each, equaling $720,000 total. Any questions on this item or any discussion? All right, that will be 3 readings. Mr. McDaniel, will you be the second?
Yes, I will.
Any other discussion or department updates?
Madam Chairperson, I'd like to make a motion that Lancaster City Council Finance Committee, for the committee to convene an executive session to consider issues related to the compensation of public employee pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G1. The executive session should include the following individuals: Lancaster City Council members, myself, President Pro Tem, Mayor Scheffler, Law Director Hall, Auditor Nettles, HR Director Nyheiser, and Acting Treasurer Bizjak.
Second? All right.
We are in executive
Roll
session.
call, please.
It's just me and you.
All right.
Vote in favor.
What do I do?
You still have to say roll call.
Okay, roll call. Don McDaniel,
Yay.
Christina Kreitz, yay. We're now in executive session.
It's an
That is an unusual one.
Madam Chairwoman, I make a motion that Lancaster City Council Finance Committee to leave executive session and return to the regular meeting at this time.
Second. Roll call. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz, yes. We are back in Finance Committee, regular Finance Committee meeting. All right, are there any additional departmental updates? Okay. Hearing none, I will turn it over to interim president, Mr. McDaniel, for tonight's meeting prep.
I just have two quick things. Mr. Matlin, 10222 is on second reading, and it looks like it's going to be suspended. Mrs. Kreitz is sponsor. Would you second that one, please? And Mr. Ehlers, just to make sure, Mr. Schoonover is sponsoring 10722, and would you second that?
I will.
Also, second reading suspension. That's all I have, Madam Chairwoman.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional items for finance? Okay, hearing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion to adjourn.
Second, meeting adjourned at 6:32. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council. Do you do that?
Yeah, we will start at 6:40.
I couldn't remember, sorry.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
We also ask for your blessing and help as we are gathered to conduct the business of the city. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand. We ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work in the best interest of the city and its residents. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers.
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz. Here. Mr. James.
Here.
Mr. Matlin.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Ms. Sitterly.
Here.
Mr. Stoughton. Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to excuse President Wool and Councilman Stoughton from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse President Owen and Councilman Stoughton from tonight's meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reading and disposal of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated August 22nd, 2022.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated August 30th, 2022 regarding the Economic Development Committee agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated September 4th, 2022 regarding Department Head's house fire submitted by Service Safety Director Paul Martin. Email dated September 7th, 2022 regarding year-to-date balance report of August 31st, 2022 submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated September 8th, 2022 regarding the Safety Committee meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated September the 11th, 2022 regarding Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton. And finally, an email dated September 12th, 2022 regarding Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of city officials. All in favor signify by saying aye. Sorry about that.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Communications.
We have three. The first I read at the last meeting, but they sent it to me again, so I'm going to read it again. It's a notice to the legislative authority of a new liquor license to 207 South Broad Street LLC, located at 402 North Broad Street, Lancaster, Ohio, 43130, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. Notice of a legislative authority of a new liquor license to Nothing But a G Thing LLC, 122 North Columbus Street, Lancaster, Ohio, 43130, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. And finally, a notice to the legislative authority of a Trex liquor license from Paceline Partners LLC, doing business as Mod Pizza, 1310 Polaris Parkway and Patio, Columbus, Ohio, 43240, Paceline Partners LLC, doing business at Mod Pizza, 1854 North Memorial Drive, Lancaster, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We do have a special presentation this evening. I'd like to invite Linda Berge-Disser from our Community Development Department forward to give the Caring Citizen Award.
Thank you. Good evening. So this week, the United Way launches their annual campaign, and they have their Caring Day, Community Care Day on Wednesday. So we like to correspond with that by giving a Caring Citizen Award. So tonight, I would like to present this award to Ashley Hughes. Ashley, if you'll join me up here. I promised her she didn't have to say anything. Ashley is a resident of Locust Street, where she is active in the neighborhood, volunteering on community improvement projects. She is also on our Community Development Advisory Committee. We're very pleased to have her on that committee. And she is a board member of Allen Chapel. She's a founding member of her gospel group, His Keys in Harmony. She donates her time for anything that is needed in the community and for her church. And she volunteers as a camp counselor for Vacation Bible School at the Good Shepherd Church. And you may recognize Ashley if you ever shop for shoes. She's a staple at Walker's Shoes. So congratulations, Ashley. Thank you for everything you do for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Ashley. All right, at this time, during this time, we set aside time to allow voters and... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, are there any petitions and memorials?
There are none to be presented.
She's keeping me on track. Thank you. Now we are ready for voters and taxpayers. During this time, we set aside time to allow voters and taxpayers of the city to address council on any item or issue they would like. If you are interested in addressing Lancaster City Council, please come to the podium, sign in with your name and address, state the same for the record. Please note that members of council will not respond to you during this time, but may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting. In accordance with the rules of council, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Please come forward.
Hello, I'm Marcia Conrad from 1005 Zimmer Street. I'm here tonight because I received 2 letters in the mail last week, one from NOPEC and one from AEP. I knew that the city's agreement with NOPEC ends at the end of December. I don't know if the council's going to renew this with them or if they're doing anything else. I've talked to both AEP and NOPEC. NOPEC has quoted me a couple fixed rate figures, which I don't really want to do, a fixed rate if the city's going to do something, because I don't want to opt out of the city. I would like to stay with whatever the city's doing, because you all do better than I do, and I can get better rate probably if I stay with what you all do. I am concerned that if I do make a mistake, that I'm hearing people are getting $200 to $800 electric bills. That's obscene as far as I can see. I can't see how anybody can do that. I do know that it's confusing on what they do. They say automatically we don't have to do anything, it'll go to a standard basic. I talked to AEP, I didn't think to ask them because I thought maybe it would just go to AEP for the fuel person. But when I Googled, I don't see AEP on the list for this area to do it. So I don't know if we will get that 0.072 rate that they list on our bill that the PUCO is offering, which is a lot lower than what I am paying, but still, my rates are really good with NOPEC. What they've quoted me is even less than what I was paying because I had chose the variable when we had to make that decision. But I know people have got to be concerned, and we wasn't expecting this since the contract's supposed to be through the end of the year, and they say they're not going to do anything until spring. But and again, I just don't know whether council, if you guys have got anything in mind to do, so we know what we're supposed to do to stay with you all. So I appreciate your time and anything you do. I do think that if you do something, you can at least, I guess maybe someone said that maybe you did put something on Facebook. I did not see that, but maybe in the paper too, something for some of us still do get the paper, that we can know what's going on so we can make this decision, because again, if the bills are going to get that high, we've got to make a decision what we're going to do. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here on my own accord tonight. No one asked me to be here.
Could you please state your name and your address for us?
Todd Nolan, 321 East Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Nobody asked me to be here except myself. My last conversation with the mayor, I told him that I could not be at your August 22nd meeting because I was out of state, but I'd be here tonight. Now, I could have not showed up at all, but that's not the way I was raised. That I was raised that your word's your word, a handshake sealed the deal, and if you did wrong, you owned up to it. And I was wrong. And I owe everyone here an apology for my rant on August 8th. I don't think myself so big that I can't come in here and admit that I was wrong. And I thought I owed it to all of you to come and do it face to face. So I really do apologize in person here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Is there anyone else who would like to speak with council this evening? Anyone else would like to address council? Well, thank you all for being here. Reports of standing committees.
Public Works Committee meeting minutes dated August 12th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Schoonover. Water Pollution Control meeting minutes dated September 7th, 2022, submitted by Mr. James. Safety Committee meeting minutes dated September 12th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Matlin. And Finance Committee meeting minutes dated September 12th, 2022, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the reports of standing committees. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have any reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings scheduled for this evening, so we'll move into the reading of resolutions. The first resolution I have is second reading on temporary resolution 102-22.
A resolution to increase receipts appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Fuel Depot Fund 7010 and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in various funds and amend the certificate with the county auditor, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 102-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 102-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes, thank you. This resolution will increase the city budgets to reflect the higher price of fuel and higher costs associated with running the fuel depot. This is a correcting piece for the remainder of the budget.
Further discussion on 102-22, motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes, Mr. President Pro Tem, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 102-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 102-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz?
Nothing further, thank you.
Any other discussion to pass 102-22? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
102-22 passes 8-0. 103, temporary resolution 103-22.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Pro Tem McDaniel. This is the second of three readings.
Second of three readings on 103-22. Temporary resolution 106-22.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Fairfield County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and actually offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Second reading.
Be the second of three readings on 106-22. 107-22.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the general fund 1001, increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor and the Lancaster Community Development Fund 2026, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 10722.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 107-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No thanks.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 10722.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 107-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, this request coming through community development in order to, it's basically a loan from the general fund to allow them to utilize the lead hazard grant that was received from the federal government, and they need those funds to essentially conduct the work they need to get that grant moving. So we've had some discussions previous meeting and then at our committee meeting in terms of this being essentially a loan from the general fund in order for them to do the work on that grant that we've already approved for them to receive.
Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 107-22 passes 8-0. 108-22.
A resolution to accept the written recommendations of the Tax Incentive Review Council, TURC, for the continuance of the 2006 Tax Incentive Finance TIF Agreement for Island Capital Investment Group, LLC Menards, Inc., RLG, Lancaster LTD, CGC, I'll do this backwards, GCG, Lancaster LTD, Anchor Hawking LLC, and Walmart Stores East LP, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, ORC 5709.85C1 and E. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
I'm going to ask Mrs.
Uh, the-
Kreitz on this one.
This is the second of three readings.
Second of three readings on 108-22. 109-22.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriation with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the city income tax fund 2016, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of ordinance temporarily numbered, resolution temporarily numbered 109-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 109-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Just briefly, as mentioned during finance, this is a resolution to appropriate in the unencumbered balance in the city income tax 2016.
Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 109-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 109-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Nothing further, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 10922 passes 8-0. 11022.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the .15 Fire Levy Fund 2046 and projected overtime for the Lancaster Fire Department. Offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, President Pro Tem McDaniel. This is a resolution to increase or decrease appropriations in the .15 Fire Levy Fund 2046 due to overtime projections, and this is the first of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 11022. Temporary resolution 11122.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement with Arcadis for the design of the lateral D trunk sewer Phase 2 and the Campground Road Pump Station and Force Main, and to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Pro Tem McDaniel. Actually, the second, I
Seconded
think,
by
is
Mr. Matlin. I'm sorry. Thank you.
This is actually the first of two readings.
First of two readings on 111-22. Temporary resolution 11222.
A resolution confirming appointments of the Fairfield County Tax Incentive Review Council, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. I would like to make I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 112-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 112-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. This is, as mentioned during Finance Committee, this is a resolution confirming appointments to the Fairfield County Turk. Nothing further.
Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 112-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter on the written record resolution temporarily numbered 112-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to pass temporary resolution 112-22 passes 8-0. 113-22.
A resolution authorizing a new signatory on the City of Lancaster financial accounts and to declare an emergency, offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 113-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 113-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. This is to allow a new signatory for the City of Lancaster financial documents for acting city treasurer, Mr. Joe Bizcheck.
Further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem McDaniel. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 113-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 113-22. Discussion, Mrs. Kreitz.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
No.
You caught me off guard.
To me, you never know what I'm gonna do.
Temporary Resolution 11322 passes 7-1. Are there any other resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council? Any other resolutions to come before council? All right, we will move to the reading of ordinances. We have no third readings. We have first reading on temporary ordinance 25-22.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $720,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of the renovation of existing building for use by the city's municipal court, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mrs. Kreitz and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mrs. Kreitz.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 25-22. Are there any other ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council? Any other ordinances? Hearing none, we'll move to tabled legislation. We have none. Unfinished business. Anyone with unfinished business? All right. We'll move into new business then. Mrs. Teener.
Just want to announce that Preston turned 21 since our last meeting. Now we're all legal. Totally legal. Oh, didn't mean to make you embarrassed. But
His face turns as red as mine.
Happy birthday,
happy
Preston.
birthday, Preston. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mr. Schoonover.
I thought it'd be a good opportunity and to address the NOPEC issue, since we had someone bring it up, and maybe if the mayor would summarize again, because I know you posted a month or so ago suggesting that we change, and then the official notice by NOPEC to do the same thing, or what they were doing.
Certainly. Yes, and I thank Ms. Conrad for bringing this question up. So Lancaster has a contract with NOPEC, which is the Northeastern Ohio Public Energy Council, which is the largest electric and gas aggregator in the state of Ohio. And our mission is to provide the lowest electric rates possible to the residents of Lancaster. And because of timing of contracting for long-term electric rates, and each utility buys electricity at auction for a period of 6 months or a year. So timing of when that auction time is up is critical. So NOPEC has traditionally purchased their power from Nextera, but because of market timing, the Nextera rates ended up being more than the AEP rates for this contract period. And so NOPEC is transferring all of its Lancaster members back to AEP, which is a lower rate at this time, and again, to pursue the mission of providing the lowest rates possible. As market conditions change over the next year, and I think NOPEC has estimated that the rates they have will, and from whoever they buy their power from, will reverse and be the lowest available again, probably in the spring. So it's a pretty simple exercise in economics about buying power and selling power. And its timing is everything in that regard, and we all know that if we read the newspapers that not only electric but gas and certainly gasoline at the pump has gone up significantly in the last 6 to 8 months, and
when the power companies go out to buy power for a year, they're kind of stuck with the auction rates for the next year where they buy it. And AEP's timing was different than NextEra's, and so AEP got in a few months and bought their power before NextEra's contract was up. So it's a simple matter of timing. And NOPEC recognized that issue and elected to return all of the members in the state to the respective utilities, whether it be First Energy, AEP, or Dayton Power and Light.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other new business? All right, we'll move to the announcement of scheduled meetings.
The next regular session of council is September 26th. The meeting following is October 10th. All meetings are held here in City Council chambers at 6:30 p.m. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. IT Telecom, September 16th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. Finance. Excuse me just one second.
Sure.
We change yours to 8:30. Not 8, it's 8:30. 8. It is 8, okay. I apologize. I wanted to verify the IT time. I thought I had it incorrectly. Okay, so IT Telecom, September 16th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. Finance, September 26th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. Service, October 7th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. Finance, October 10th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. And finally, Water Pollution Control, October 12th at 8:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Do we have any bills?
There are none to be presented.
We have no need for an executive session. At this time, accept the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I would like to make that motion, we adjourn.
Regular meeting of council is adjourned.
Please sign your legislation.
I think it's